So what do the stories of the enslaved and their descendants have to do with race relations today? Everything. People who don't know their history and culture are like a tree without roots. Slavery is part of that history, some of it rooted here at Monticello. Slavery and its consequences, including Jim Crow, segregation, and disenfranchisement, continue to cast a shadow over every American. It impacts how we live and, too often, how we die. Monticello is a fundamental place to understand our country's difficult history and to inspire us to live up to our greatest ideals. In Jefferson's own words, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Jefferson chose this place so he could look out across Virginia and the world, the nation from here. One of the things he would have seen was the creation of the largest slave empire in the modern world, that he was both an architect of, a beneficiary of, a worrier about. Up here, looking at the Missouri crisis in 1820, a fire bell in the night, foreseeing the dissolution of the Union. And the sales that took place on this lawn, the sales of his family once he was gone, would have been repeated 1,000,000 times. 1,000,000 of the domestic slave trade, of people coming from old places like Albemarle County in Virginia to the new places, Louisiana and Texas and Arkansas and Mississippi. 1,000,000. What it meant was that families who had lived here for generations on any day could awaken and find themselves torn apart by the slave trade. And from this mountain and from Virginia, radiated out across an area the size of continental Europe, the great empire of slavery that dominated the United States and its history for generations. We know that one of Jefferson's greatest accomplishments in his old age was creation of the University of Virginia. He could not have imagined 34 years after his death that he could have looked down, maybe with his telescope at the rotunda, and seen the flag of secession flying from the top of the rotunda that students had crawled up there to unleash. And he certainly could not have imagined that the university and this whole town would have become one giant hospital as young men with shattered lives were shipped here by railroads to suffer and die for the cause of perpetuating a new nation based on slavery. He could not have imagined that as soon as African American people had the opportunity to leave this place, they would. That they would begin going to the north, seeking out cities, going to the cities of Virginia, trying to find a place to make a life for themselves. He could not have foreseen that in 1902, in the very capital that he helped design in Richmond, lawmakers would write a new constitution for the Commonwealth of Virginia that would systematically and unashamedly deprive African American men of the vote and proclaim that was their purpose and enshrine it in the law of the land. Cannot have imagined looking down from here that Charlottesville and Albemarle County and all the rest of the Commonwealth and all the rest of the vast empire of the South would systematically discriminate and segregate people by race that Annette's talking about. So the story here radiates out from Monticello, just as the words of the Declaration of Independence have radiated out from here. So have the systems, the structures, the rationales, the rationalizations, the habits of thought, the dependency of white people on African American people.
The first thing we must do is to teach history to our children that is accurate. We cannot have new generations of children growing up with the myths of the past and acting on the myths of the past. And so we should really help all of us understand, I call it the fundamental birth defect. And it wasn't just about, it was for privileged white men after 100 years of this terrible transformation that went on. The culture and the nation was built on slavery, and they did not want to give up white male privilege and the wealth that came with that, South as well as nationally. And so we really kind of have to confront that, because it not only this birth defects, they affected me as a woman, They affected, people who didn't have property rights, and they sold them their whiteness, but deprived them of equal participation in the Constitution and the life of this country. So there is an urgency that I feel about sort of doing away with the myths of history and really teaching our children the truth about who we are and where we came from, but how we are changing that gap between creed and deed and what they can do to change that gap between creed and deed. We're at the most dangerous point in our history that we've had in a very long time. And we need to talk about it. We need to mobilize against it because this snake never goes away. It just keeps flaring up. So I just hope that we can focus on how do we educate ourselves, and this is a wonderful forum today. But how do we get that out to all of our children, into our curriculums, into whatever, because we are still a rather historically ignorant people.
We have to know what happened in slavery, but we also have to give close and careful attention to the reverberations of slavery, the conditions that were started there that continue to reverberate in the lives of people who are the descendants of the enslaved.